As a kid who grew up in the 80s and 90s, when I think gaming, one of the first companies that comes to mind is Konami. As one of the staple companies for the NES, they released so many quality titles with a sound that's all too familiar when it hits your ear. A former shell of what they were, nowadays they mainly push pachinko machines and deny their employees from attending award events. But they weren't always this unsavory. And that's what I'm here to talk about, the Konami NES years.
What's up, guys? Lucious T here, and we're talking about Castlevania 3. Not 1, not 2, but 3. Konami had made the first 2 games and made them very differently, so they decided, let's do the best of both and let's make a third one. So in this game, it's back to the original stage progression, but you got different progression paths you can take and different characters. The different progression paths remind me of Cobra Triangle. And this game is awesome, and it's hard as a mighty thunder cock. You go through, you die a lot, there's unlimited continues, there's a password system. Belmont is not Simon Belmont, but he's badass Belmont. And wow, this game is amazing. Until you get to the last level and the stupid blocks. They take forever, and I hate the damn blocks, they drive me nuts! But this game is great, I will beat it one day, and you should play it too. Woo! Castlevania!
1990's Mission Impossible for the NES is a video game adaptation of the hit show's 80s version that wasn't as successful, where you control the 3 agents, Max, Grant, and Nicholas, who are tasked with saving a famous scientist from a terrorist group known as the Sinister Seven. You know, typical secret agent stuff. The game is played from a top-down perspective where you use the agents' different abilities to get from point A to B in each stage, solving puzzles, avoiding traps, and taking out the enemy. Unfortunately, you'll get lost trying to get around the confusing stage layout, getting run over by cars, and getting arrested for hitting civilians, which you'll probably do a bit since it's kinda hard to tell from enemies and civilians sometimes. Mission Impossible is so aggravating that it makes the Nintendo 64 game look like the Second Coming. Wait, scratch that. I mean the PlayStation port of the Nintendo 64 game. In other words, just let this game self-destruct.
Snake's Revenge was intended to be the NES sequel to the original Metal Gear, and was actually developed without the direct supervision of Hideo Kojima. This later prompted him to make a legitimate Metal Gear 2, which is far better than this title. Snake's Revenge brought back a lot of elements that made the original game famous, such as the stealthy gameplay mechanics, creative weapons and items, and a somewhat interesting story and setting. Unfortunately, the game suffers from a large number of flaws, with poor stage and enemy layout in certain areas, one-hit kill traps with no prior indication, cryptic instructions due to awful translation, and some bosses that make you contemplate suicide. However, despite these issues, there are still some great aspects of this game. The sound effects and music are some of the best on the system, and when the gameplay is unhampered by bad design choices, it plays great, and getting through sections undetected is incredibly satisfying. It's not the best experience on the NES, but it's far from the worst. If you want a taste of just how this game plays, be sure to check out my streamed playthrough of it, or tune into Brazzle the Gamer's Snake's Revenge review, which he and I collaborated on.
Released in September of 1990, Rollergames is a beat-em-up based on the semi-popular sports show of the same name. The story goes like this. A seedy organization known as Viper have kidnapped the commissioner of Rollergames and corrupted 3 teams in order to win the large cash reward. Now it's up to 3 good teams, the T-Birds, Hot Flash, and the Rockers, to stop Viper and save the games. Quite a far cry from the more show-faithful arcade version that Konami made. As stated earlier, Rollergames is a beat-em-up where you skate through each stage, jumping over pits and platforms, dodging obstacles, and slamming goons down, all while heading to the boss fight in the allotted time. Now, you might think this sounds like a walk in the park, but you'd be greatly mistaken, as this game is friggin' tough, due to a combo of brutal AI and tough jumps, courtesy of the somewhat floaty controls. Despite this, if you're looking for a classic challenge that fits the definition of NES hard, then slap Rollergames in the gray box and give it a go.
Super Contra Arien no Gaikushu, or Super Contra The Alien Strikes Back, was released as Super C in North America for the Nintendo Entertainment System in April of 1990. Super C is a follow-up to Contra, which is one of the earliest titles to popularize the run-and-gun genre. This sequel dropped the name Contra due to the Iran-Contra affair, which took place in 1985. Super C features 8 levels of grueling difficulty that will challenge even the most seasoned gamers that attempt to beat it. The game's plot, much like the original, has you attempting to defeat an invading alien force. In Super C, the alien force has taken over an allied military base controlling most of its troops. The protagonists, Bill and Lance, must now fight their former comrades as well as alien monsters to defeat the Red Falcon menace again. Super C takes many elements from the original Contra and expands on them slightly by including top-down levels as well as a new version of the flamethrower, which explodes when hitting a target rather than having a small fireball that flies in a corkscrew pattern. Super C offers a challenging level set that's arguably better than the original. The game, also like the original, features 2-player simultaneous gameplay, which was a somewhat uncommon trait for the NES at the time. Graphically, Super C stands out on the NES, often having more sprites on screen at a time than most other games on the console, at the cost of fairly bad sprite flicker in some areas. Super C's soundtrack, while good, pales in comparison to its predecessor with less memorable tracks. Overall, despite its difficulty, which you may need the Konami code or a Game Genie to beat, Super C is among the more memorable titles on the NES and is worth playing or owning for anyone interested in the NES's library.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game, is a stellar port that retains almost all the elements of the game that it's named after. You could choose between all 4 of the Ninja Turtles: Leonardo, Raphael, Michelangelo, and Donatello. Moving around each of the 7 stages, our heroes can use not only their standard weapons, but also items like manhole covers and parking meter poles against enemies. Though this game isn't arcade perfect, it makes up for it with 2 brand new stages in level 3 and level 6. Stages are a lot longer than the arcade version, and without infinite quarters, this game's a challenging foray for the mean green fighting machines. Turtle power indeed. Full of amazing renditions of the arcade music and stellar graphics, Konami's classic beat-em-up is fantastic on the NES. If you like this video and you want more TMNT goodness, check out my Hyperstone Heist review.